We've talked about structuring an introduction. We've talked about creating a thesis statement. Now let's talk about moving from your thesis statement into the first body paragraph. So my thesis statement was, these were very different circumstances, and yet they led Harris and me to the same lesson. There is great pain in the unexpected, but there is also great healing. There is great pain in the unexpected, but there is also great healing. Moving on to the first body paragraph. In Harris's case, this pain started with an old injury that seemed to fade, but eventually caught up with her and worsened. It was in her doctor's office that she learned just how much. She writes, "One unlucky stumble before the operation could land me in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. The doctor's final words, 'Don't get back-ended,' were ominous." Even more ominous for Harris was the fact that she was alone in the world, without a romantic partner or family members who were close by and or emotionally close enough to be of assistance. She describes a moment of torment immediately following her life-changing doctor's appointment. Quote, "I walked to my car in a daze and carefully drove home to an empty house. I was alone and scared. Ultimately, we are all alone in our bodies, in our own skin. But when our bodies fail us and we also find ourselves physically and emotionally alone, it can be twice as devastating." Now, notice that I'm going back and forth between Harris and me, and so I want to keep reminding of you of that, and I want to set up this parallel relationship, and I want to continue to remind you using these parallel words, using words that echo each other, reusing words when I talk about Harris and then when I talk about my own experience, using words here and there from the original article itself. So in Harris's case, that's how I move smoothly from my thesis statement into my topic sentence, because I'm talking about two cases, quote unquote. So now I'm telling you, hey, this is all about the same thing, but now I'm going to focus on Harris's situation. So notice my topic sentence. In Harris's case, this pain started with an old injury. I go on to talk a little bit about the injury, and I give you some quotes, and then I comment on the point of my paragraph, which is that, okay, here's this physical injury, but what Harris is talking about is not just this injury, but how this injury left her in a dependent state, and she had not been dependent on anyone in a long time, in part because she couldn't be, because society did not present her with that option. So I'm reminding you of all of this. Ultimately, we're alone in our bodies, in our own skin, whether or not we're married. But when our bodies fail us and we also find ourselves physically and emotionally alone, it can be twice as devastating. And so that's why it can be really tricky and scary when we don't have people to act as a support system, or when our families can't step in and save us. Okay, so here's a note I put in bold. Body paragraph. I frame and introduce quotes. By frame, it's like before I give you the quote, I have some sort of statement. I have a signal phrase. She writes, using a reporting verb, comma. She writes, comma. Then I give you the quote. Then I end the quote and I put the end quotation mark outside the period. Notice, for my other quote, I use a colon. She describes a moment of torment immediately following her life-changing doctor's appointment. I set up the quote. I tell you what to expect. It's supporting a point. She had some emotional torment. It's a complete sentence. She describes, etc., etc., doctor's appointment. It's a complete sentence. That's why I use a colon afterwards, and then I give you the quote, and then I do my commentary, my analysis. This is what I've come up with. I think ultimately we're alone in our bodies. Ultimately, when our bodies fail us, and then we find ourselves not only in that kind of aloneness that all human beings have, because hey, we're not the same person, then here we are. We're also physically alone, because there's no one around but us. And then we might be emotionally alone because we don't have a lot of people in our lives, or don't perceive that we do. And so there's not just the double devastation, there's the triple devastation, okay? And so that's sort of where I'm going with all of this.